Hi. So I'm starting a stopwatch because, I need that. Definitely need that to keep us on track. So my name is Alyssa Nicoll, and I'm so excited to be here. Did you guys have a delicious lunch? Good? Was good? Was it salad? Who, no? No, I heard it was going to be salad again, and I was excited, but I was working on my slides, so I missed the delicious salad. So I hope you all had fun. I don't see my slides up. That could potentially be an issue in seeing them. I don't really know how to get them up, so we could go freeballing, but I would prefer not to. So, thank you. You got to see my lovely Pinkie Pie background, though. But not as useful as service worker slides. Awesome, yay! Okay, so I'm trying a new experiment, so bear with me. It's called Dropbox Paper. Has anyone ever tried it? It's like Google Docs for Dropbox. And I was fascinated because you can type in Markdown and it pops in live. There's no side editor panel, so we're gonna give this a go and see how it works. But service workers for cows. So I am an Angular developer, and I recently got a job as a dev expert for Progress. And before this move, I recently moved. I didn't really understand the need for service workers. But I moved from Orlando, the beautiful city with Disney and, things that are open past 10 p.m., right? Like an actual city. And I moved to the land of 6 megabit internet. And this is when I realized, wow, service workers actually make a difference. I was surrounded by grass and family and these lovely creatures, and like I said, rather lacking in the internets. So this is this is actually a test we did at our house. That's a K in case you missed it. This was the max that we were ever going to hit. And I was like, we're not in a third world country. We're in the middle of America. This is a real thing. I was really actually horribly shocked. And it kind of broke me out of this zone where I was all developers and all people using my stuff have great network, right? It's just kind of a lie, I guess, that I'd been believing that I didn't even realize, because once I lost what I had, I was like, how painful is it for other people to use the internet, right? So yes, this land of mooers showed me how valuable service workers really are. How do they help in this situation? So I did some speaker training, and have any of you ever done any kind of formal speaking? Anybody in the audience? We got 1, 2, a couple, okay. Not as many as I thought. So I did some speaker training, and there was this activity. And so if you guys are ever, even if you're going in for a meeting, you can try this. It's a really good way to condense an idea down to its core. And so if you're doing a talk or just even holding a meeting, you can take time to do whatever you're going to do in 5 minutes. So even if it's a 30-minute talk or an hour talk, do that talk in 5 minutes. And then do it again in 1 minute. And then do it again in 1 sentence, and then do it again in 1 word. And so I did this for this talk, and oddly enough, I came up with the word aspirin. That is our 1 word for this talk. And the sentence for this talk kind of explains the 1 word. So service workers are the aspirin or the pain pill to the headache that is painful network speeds. That really is the core of this talk. I'm a little technical. I know the Angulars, I know the Angular JSs really well. But as I started feeling this pain of network speeds, I was like, there's gotta be a better way. And I actually, honestly, I'm not even kidding, I noticed on this beautiful 6 megabit internet, I noticed websites that were using service workers because I could use them. So, yes, aspirin. What be used service workers? So there's lots of synopsi, is that a word? We're going with it. There's lots of synopsi online of what service workers are. These two from you can see the link at the very bottom, developers.google.com. These 2 sentences I like the best, so I'm just gonna bring them up. Service workers, programmable network proxy, allowing you to control home network requests from your page. And the reason this is so exciting, is it allows you to support offline experiences, giving developers complete control over the experience. So there's kind of a twofold thing here that I feel like service workers, they meet the need of. One, offline experiences, obviously, but two, just a better experience in really horrible network, right? Because you can load it once, it's cached, and hopefully, the example site that I'm using is ngDoc. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, ngdoc.io. Oh, I got a squeal. Hey, thanks, Bonnie. That was adorable. She's so cute. But yes, so the example site is ngdoc.io, and we'll get into that. But this is the code of conduct version, because I wanted to get some words of the wise. So Mike actually gave me a beautiful quote, and it was not code of conduct worthy. I'm going to let you fill in the blank. But he was like, service workers are my assistant who I treat as my equal, and they do my bidding. And this was his gangster. I was like, you have to do that face again. And so he did it for me, and I made a GIF out of it. But yes, so that's the official and the unofficial of what is a service worker. But I want to go through my journey of adding service workers to ngdoc.io, and I'm hoping that through this you'll realize it's not as scary and it's not that hard, and that it actually does have benefit to people who are real users that are experiencing horrible, horrible networks. So the very first step, this is from, I'm actually going to break away real quick from this. Can you see this? Full screen. There we go. Okay. So this is from ngAtlanta.io. I literally was on their guide for service workers. So if you're like, where did she get this nonsense? Blame them. So yes, we're going to go starting from step number 1. And I kind of modified the verbiage. And as we go through, the first step was install that service worker, and they were like, yarn add, and I was like, yarn? I don't know. Is the Angular team really behind yarn now? I'm still on NPM, and ngDoc was on NPM, and I was like, I don't even know if I can use yarn and NPM together. So anytime that it didn't really fit my use case, I just kind of swapped it out a little bit. So we NPM installed the service worker, and I'm gonna go back into full screen mode. So in our case, it looked like npm install Angular service worker, and this was my face. So there's this really fun feature where you can record your face while you're recording your screen in this cloud app, and I was like, oh cool, look, it's working. And so I was literally watching it install, and I was like, okay, this is okay, it's pretty fast. I was not on the slow network, if you were wondering. We would not be here today if I was while I was programming. And then I got this really sad face because I was on step literally number 1, step number 1, and all of a sudden, I got errors, and I was like, really? Step number 1? Okay. So the moral of this story is make sure that everything's up to date before you get going, right? Let's just update all the things. And so that's what it was saying, is that I require a pure dependency of this for core and common. And so I know it's a pain, but I actually called Mike on the phone. I was at the grocery store, and I was it was the middle of the day, and I was frustrated, and so I was going to the grocery store to get some groceries, and I was like, Mike, this isn't working, and I had to go through, and it's this huge pain to upgrade everything, or to update all my dependencies. And that's when he told me about update. And how many of you heard of his talk yesterday? And he talked about from the CLI, the update. Anybody? Did you hear Mike's talk? No? We got a couple? Okay, yeah, I know, right? I was so excited. He told me, and I'm in the grocery store line, and the lady's bagging my groceries, and I'm like, shut up! And so I'm really excited, and I know it's a pain to update things, but this guy's working really hard. That's us in Poland, and they're eating ice cream. But he's working really hard on ng update, which literally is going to revolutionize our lives. I'm imagining, because I was like, Mike, there's got to be a command for this. There's no way you want me to go through all my dependencies and select the 5 point whatever and then update them. He's like, no, you have to do that. And I was like, are we in the 12th century here? What is that? So it's coming. But for now, we have to suck it up and update our dependencies like women. so let's just do it, right? 2 hours later, yes, I used the SpongeBob GIF because I don't know if I'm dyslexic or what, but I was like, why is this updating so difficult? And I had my husband come over and look at it, and he was like, oh, it's because you're not installing the right thing. See, it says to install this. And I'm like, can I not read? So tip to the Y, or a word from the, someone who's been there, like just read, I guess. Like actually read what it wants you to install, and that'll save you some pain. So yes, rolls eyes. Number 2, we are past number 1, and that was way more painful than I thought it should be. But I think, hopefully, if you all try to use service workers today, you will not experience the bumps I did. So enable your service worker. So you can run this command in your terminal, or if you start a new project, you can use the -- service worker with ngNew. In my Angular CLI file, it was already set to true, so I was like, nothing on number 2, right? Like number 1 was so painful, and then number 2 was like, it's already done. Okay, so that was easy. Number 3, import service workers in your root app module. So you just have to put those 2 lines in app.module.ts. Super simple, I wasn't sweating it. Number 4, register service workers in your root app module. So this was the part where I was like, okay, I'll do it, but I don't like it. And here's, I know that sounds weird. How many of you know the imports list that I'm talking about in your root module? Anybody? We got like a couple of hands. I can show you. It's gonna be painful though, so bear with me. I was like, I can bring up the code. So this full screen, okay, and we're gonna bump it up to like 1 million. So this is in our app module, and there's an imports list. And the reason I was like, I disagree, is because of how funky this line looks. We're gonna collapse the side. This line looks funky compared to everything else, right? You've got like browser module, browser animations, and then like we're actually calling something here. What the dickens is that, right? So it's fine, just do it, just put it in there, but I'm gonna go ahead and show you. Oh, see, this is the one bad thing, the scrolling. I'm like, really, Dropbox? You can't just keep me there? It's fine. I'm not going to complain. Really, I won't. So yes, number 3, number 4, yes. So the first part, I really liked how the docs did explain this. So that's really interesting to me, is like, they'll give you the steps of like 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Okay, cool. But then they actually go in to explain the details of like, if you were curious, and I'm like, well, I was curious, thank you. So I made this nice little arrows. The first part is the module that we're importing, which is what we're used to seeing in the imports list. And the second part, you have to call the register helper for registering purposes. And that is where Alyssa left off. I was like, registering purposes, you got it. That's all I need to know right now. So I tend to get overwhelmed super easily, and so I didn't want to dive in so deep that I was lost at step number 4, and I never actually got the service worker working. And it's a 20-minute talk. So we're moving on. The file ngSW-worker. This is the name of the pre-built service worker script, which the CLI copies into dist. So we're going to get to dist in a moment. Oh, the dist folder. Does anybody, I actually wanted to ask this, have any of you ever ngbuild, like ran the ngbuild command? I got a giggle. Why was there a giggle? Is that funny, Tara? I don't know. So yeah, I know it sounds weird, but I've been an Angular developer for like a bajillion years, like 3. And I had never ran build before this. And so I was actually curious. So yeah, can we have hands again of like, has anybody ran ngbuild before? See, it's not as many as I would have thought. I would have thought like every hand was up, so it makes me feel a little bit better about like, I didn't need it before now. I just didn't need to see anything in production mode because everything in development was like, so create the configuration file is number 5. So there's a lot of good ones out there. The Angular docs has one. The CLI has a boilerplate one. It looks like this or some version of this, and you literally copy paste. This is a link to, in the Angular I/O guide, to this service worker. But like I said, there's so many people in the Angular community who are like, I have one too, you should use mine. And I was talking to Maxime, because I was like, I don't really get this one part of service workers. And he was like looking at my config file, and he was like, you should try using my config file. And I was like, okay, so people are really like touchy about their config files. They feel like they're just like super special, so just pick one, right? Like just pick one, put it in there, let's get this built, right? So now we get to run ngbuild, and we use -- prod. And at this moment, be very sure. So I need to dive more into this, and I will. But for the purposes of this talk, I've heard a rumor that it can be difficult to remove the service worker. So just be sure, right? I mean, you're about to build. Just use your noggin and be like, yeah, I really want service workers. And this is the only negative or downside that I've heard, and you have been warned. So yes, ngbuild.prod, that was me running it in my, oh my goodness. Isn't my terminal gorgeous? Every time I see it, I just get a little happier. Like, there's like pink text and that fun little apple at the top. I don't know about you guys. If you don't have like an environment that when you open it up, you just like, yeah, like you should have that for when you code. So yeah, definitely can share this theme with you if you don't have a happy theme yet. So does it work? Okay, this was the part in the process where I was learning about production versus development mode. And I have always, when I'm working on ngDoc, used ngserve. That's just what I do. So I actually tried to do it because I for some reason, have a problem with reading. We addressed this earlier, but I was like, oh yeah, next up, we built it. Let's just go ahead and serve it. So I went into the dist and I served it, and I got it wasn't working. It was bad. And so I was like, all right, I'll go read. And I hit this first line, because ngserve does not work. And I was like, what? So I was a little grumpy at this point. I was like, I don't get to use ngserve. You have to use a separate HTTP server. This is literally what flashed through my mind at this moment. I was like, it broke, like the Aladdin part where it's like, does it break? So yes, we can't use ngserve. We're left out in the cold like animals and have to use an HTTP server. It's okay, we will survive. I really, it's probably not that big of a deal to you guys. You're like, I do that every day. But just wait and see what happened. So I CD'd into dist, and I was like, fine, HTTP server, port 8080. And it said, I don't know if you can read that because it's super tiny. It says, ZSH command not found, HTTP server. And I was like, ooh. Because at this point I was like, okay, I've done some Ruby in my past, and my Ruby friends had told me about this simple HTTP server that you can run like so. And I'm pretty sure it comes default on Mac. And so I was like, why the dickens would they tell us to use something that's just not already on our Mac? But I get it now after, you'll see, in the end, you will see, we'll get there. But at this point I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not using HTTP server. I was like, I've got this little alias for simple server, and so I went ahead. This is my update. If you want to use HTTP server and you get that command, just npm install it globally. I did look it up later, but in the moment of anger, I was like, I'm using my Python server. So you will see some screenshots that use both. That's the moral of the story. Lo and behold, it did work when I ran the simple server in the dist folder. And when I pulled it up, it looked like this. So this was awesome for me because I was like, whoa, look, it's kind of working, kind of. We have a lot of the assets and buttons and such, and colors and themes and such and fonts, but we're not getting any articles or tags. And I was like, okay, so this is out of the box, right? This is service worker out of the box. I slapped it on my app. I didn't customize anything, and this is what it wants to give me. And I was like, oh, wait, I didn't put it into offline mode. I was so special. I was like, I should probably test that. Checked the offline box, and it still looked the same. And I was like, okay, so it really is giving me this. Or is it? I have a weird problem with, I think this is why I got into development, because my friends would be like, yeah, this is how it works. And I'd be like, is it really? And I just look at them, and they'd be like, well, I think so. And then they'd have to find out for me, or I would dig into it. And so these next couple of slides are for me testing the theory of, is it actually working? And so this was me, I don't know, do any of you do this? As soon as I saw it working, I was like, but is it really working? So because I've never used HTTP server like this before, I'd always used ngserve, I just went ahead and stashed everything, and I checked out a non-service worker branch. I was like, this one doesn't have the service worker on it, check it out. And I went ahead and reran reran the HTTP server. And that's when I was getting really serious with it. I was like, we're pulling up incognito. There's not gonna be any secrets pulled on me. I'm gonna know what's going on. I don't think anyone's trying to trick me here, but I pulled up incognito, and then I went into it. And if it loads, you'll see that it looks like that. And so I think I also have, I did. I put it into offline mode as well. And so when we go into offline mode, I was like, okay, so that's what it looks like. And when I go into offline mode, I type in localhost, and it'll go. And I was like, oh, the dinosaur! This was the moment for me, right? Like seeing that dinosaur, I was like, okay, so when you go in offline mode normally, and you don't have service workers, you get the fun dino game. But you don't want the fun dino game, right? Like we don't want that reward. And so this to me was like proof in my mind that the service worker out of the box, slapped onto my Angular project, was doing something, and I was super pumped. So the next step was, I'm like super ADHD. Like there are people who I've talked to and they're like, yeah, I have ADHD too. And I'm like, no, but like they should add like a plus to that disorder for me because I like really have it. And so at this point I was like, I have this list of things I want to do on the website. And we had changed from like a red theme to a green theme like a while ago, but we still had the horrible red logo. And it's one of those things that like, you let slip your mind, but then you go back and you check the site to add a feature, and you see that, and you're like, Twitch, oh, I didn't take care of that yet. So I was in the middle of doing a service worker demo, and I was like, I'm gonna fix that. And then this is why I'm so glad I did. Thank God for my ADHD, because I came up with this slide of, well, how do we actually update like code though? Like how are we gonna see our updates? Because Command-Shift-R is not gonna work like if we're still running in this mode. So I went into our app and I went ahead and changed the logo. And at this point, it was very logical, at least to me it was. I was like, well, I need to stop the server, and then I'm pretty sure I need to rebuild again, and then start the server again, right? And then I should see my new logo, which I didn't. I still saw the red logo, and I was like, what the heck? It's okay. Take a breather. See these beautiful cows. These are actually, like all these cows, except for the Minecraft one, are from the place that we moved in Oklahoma. So the Minecraft cow is not real. I don't mean to break your hearts, but so the service worker is actually doing its job. It's okay that we were still seeing the red one. I'm actually just going to press play on this because this was me. Because I knew I was going to do this, I actually was recording while I was, and then I just spliced it down. So I was like, I'm going to change the green logo, go over, and then I'm going to stop the server, like I said, rebuild. Oh, goodness. So for those of you who didn't raise your hand when I asked, have you ever ran ngBuild? Oh, man. Let me tell you something about 92% chunk optimization. Oh boy. So as you can see, I just ran ngBuild, and we're running through, and it's like 10%. And I'm like, cool. Oh, it'll get to 92 all right. This is a 3-minute video, so we're fast forwarding. We're at, let's see, a minute now, and we're at 92% chunk optimization. We're not going to sit and watch it as long as I sat and watched it. We're going to move on with our lives and look at this tweet, because this is what I did when I saw it. I was like, why are you so slow, chunk optimization? Like, really? And Mike was, you can go on and see the chain. It's actually really funny. But I was like, Mike, fix it. I don't know why, but for it, always, I blame Mike. Like, if something's broken, I'm just like, fix it, Mike. And so, yeah, I'm sorry. We all love you. But, so, I'm going to go back to the video, and then I'm just going to fast forward because it's still on chunk optimization. So at this point, the build worked. We've got all these beautiful green rendered, and I restarted the server and went back over. And so the red logo was still there. And I was like, what the dickens? But I refreshed, and it was still there. And I'm like, what the dickens? So I think I refreshed a third time, and I think what happened was I didn't give it enough time the first one because it finally popped in with the green logo. And this is the point where I'm like, cool, I finally got my change, but what was happening? And so, yes, there were, I'm not sure if you noticed, but there were errors galore. We're not getting our tags and articles. I want to back up a bit, sorry. So this is actually the service worker doing its job. It is looking at the cached version before downloading the new stuff for speed, yo. And if we refresh, we did see the green logo. So I don't think I'm gonna do this in the future. Like, I think what I'm gonna do is like leave my service worker programming over here, and then I'm gonna leave my other ADHD programming over here, and I'll just run ngserve and do the normal process where it updates. But if for some reason, I guess, if you're like, hey, did that route actually get cached? Is it working properly now with these new assets, or is that font there? You do have to give it a little bit of time and make sure refresh. Although Pascal last night was telling me about a nifty there's a nifty checkbox in the dev tools. Has any of you ever seen this? It's like some checkbox about updating your service workers. So more to be had. And oh, Tara's like, I know. Tara's so smart. She knows everything. All right, we are moving on. So this next part, you remember the spinning blue that I kept looking at? And I was like, when are we ever going to see articles? So this is what was happening. Essentially, I had like ngserve and then npm run server are the two things that I run to start ngdoc locally. And I had the server going in the background, but I didn't really expect it to like link up with the HTTP server because I didn't ever tell it to, but I still had it running just in case, I don't know, the Angular team wanted to magically make that work for me. I just had it running. And so I was like, at this point, I'm like, how do I get the articles and the tags like from this API to the HTTP server? And that's whenever I went to GitHub, and this is when I started digging into HTTP server because I could not find it for the Python server. Sure, it's there. But that's where there's this -- proxy. And so for any of you who've never dealt with it before, because I hadn't, you literally just tack on, so HTTP server to start the server, -- proxy, and then localhost 8801. And so that's where my API is. That's where you can go 8801/API/tags or /articles or whatever, and that's where you get the goods. So whenever I did that, I started my HTTP server, I was so pumped because it like loaded in like this. And I was actually tweeting about it. I was like, what is the difference between like HTTP server or the Python server? And I got a couple of like weird answers, and I'm still a little lost on that. So if you know and you want to talk to me afterwards, would love to hear it. But essentially, we got our HTTP server running, and it's listening to the backend and getting that. But at this point, I had to do it. I knew it would fail because I didn't tell it about it, but I had to do it. So I put it into offline mode, and it still doesn't have the articles and tags. And that makes sense, right? I mean, we have one last step to victory, and it makes sense why we don't have it. I didn't tell it to, and if it did work, I would be really confused or be like, Angular is like really on top of everything. They're magical. So we're gonna talk about caching custom buds. Custom buds is my word for things like routes, or I think one of the examples in the Google Docs was like fonts, if you have special weird fonts or assets that you need. So this beautiful data group is how I ended up getting my articles, my tags, the rest of these that you see. And you're like, where did you, like, that was my other question, was like, how do I know what other URLs to add in here? I literally opened up my dev tools, and whatever red was yelling at me, that's what I added here. I don't do backend much. I'm really heavy on the UI UX side, and that's actually why Joe Eames brought me on the project. He was like, hey, I hear you hate Bootstrap. And I was like, I do. And he's like, can you help me get rid of it? And I was like, I can. So whenever I was like, I'm gonna tackle service workers, I guess just don't be afraid to be not as smart as you feel like you should be to tackle a project. Because I literally was like, at this point, okay, I know I need articles, I know I need tags, and I see all these other red things that are yelling at me. Let me just throw those in there as well. And it turned out that the service worker cached those routes. And so, as you can see now, we have offline glory, as I like to call it. And this was the second magical moment. The first was whenever I realized the service worker was actually by default, out of the box caching something. And the second one was whenever I added for our own custom project something that I knew the service worker couldn't know about. And it was there in offline mode. And I was like, it's not a lie. Like, it was magic. I get really excited in these moments. I was probably like giggling in the other room. You can probably attest, yeah. So I've really enjoyed being close to family. That's the reason, we left the gorgeous city of Orlando. And working on the ranch, hanging out with these crazy, amazing critters. Cows, that's who I'm talking about, cows. But the crippling network speeds, without service workers would literally ruin this. It wouldn't be a possibility without that. Some would even say that if not for cows, service workers would never have been invented. Now, don't argue that point with me, but I think it could be true. It could be. So when you're thinking, should I service worker? Is it worth the 30 minutes to set up? And if you're like super whiz kid, it might be 10 minutes for you, and you might not run into those like NG upgrade things that I ran into. Oh, Lord. But when you're thinking, should I even do it? Is it worth it? This is me petting the first baby cow that was born.
Little, like a puppy.
It's like a cow. It's like a cow puppy. It literally was as soft as a puppy. So, I mean, just remember that it's for the cow puppies, you guys. So thank you so much for having me.